Imagine waking up one morning, going about your normal day. Imagine waking up one morning, going about your normal day completely unaware that one of Canada's most wanted murderers has been living just down the street from you, not in Toronto, not in Canada at all, but right in the middle of a small American town, hiding under a fake name, armed with a gun, and thinking he had gotten away with it all. That is exactly what happened, and the story of how this man escaped, where he hid, and how he was finally caught is something every single Canadian needs to hear right now. So stay with me, because what I'm about to share with you is not just a story about one criminal. It is a warning about gaps in our system, about how dangerous people can vanish, and about what is really happening at the borders right now in 2026. Let's start from the very beginning. In the early morning hours of May 7th, 2024, a violent shooting shook the Winona Drive and Vaughan Road area in Toronto's York District, CP24. The shooting claimed the life of 31-year-old Trevor Dalton John, and a woman also suffered non-life-threatening injuries in the attack. CP24 police responded, witnesses were interviewed, evidence was gathered, and a suspect was identified. His name was Adrian Vincent Walker, a 28-year-old man from Toronto. And instead of turning himself in, instead of facing what he had done, Walker did what cowards do. He ran. Now here is where this story gets deeply troubling. Walker had a prior criminal history that included over 3 years in a Canadian prison for aggravated assault. Change flow. This was not a man who stumbled into crime by accident. This was someone with a documented violent past, someone the system had already dealt with before, and someone who was now wanted for the most serious charge in the criminal code, first-degree murder. And yet, somehow, he managed to disappear. Toronto police listed Walker as a most wanted person, and he was eventually ranked as Canada's 14th most wanted fugitive on the BOLO program's Canada's 25 most wanted list. CP24. Think about what that means. This is not some low-level offender we are talking about. This man was among the most dangerous fugitives in the entire country, and he was nowhere to be found on Canadian soil. So where did he go? According to a news release from the U.S. Attorney's Office, Northern District of Mississippi, Walker had allegedly been using an alias while hiding in Tupelo, Mississippi. WLBT, he crossed into the United States illegally, at an unknown time and through an unknown location. He gave himself a new name, and he quietly blended into a community in the American Deep South, nearly 2,000 kilometers away from the scene of the crime. And here is the part that should send a chill down your spine. When federal agents knocked on a residential door in Tupelo, Mississippi on March 23, 2026, they weren't just making a routine immigration arrest. They were pulling a murder suspect out of an American neighborhood where he had been quietly living, armed and undetected. Tom Wong armed. This man, wanted for murder and attempted murder in Canada, was found with an illegal firearm in his possession. He was not just hiding, he was prepared. The U.S. Department of Homeland Security confirmed the arrest, noting that Walker had entered the U.S. illegally and now faces federal charges for illegal entry and illegal possession of a firearm, in addition to the outstanding Canadian warrants for first-degree murder and attempted murder. Homeland Security. Now think about this from a Canadian perspective. For nearly 2 full years, this man was gone. Nearly 2 years of a grieving family in Toronto not seeing justice. Nearly 2 years of a killer living freely, sleeping in a bed, eating meals, walking around a neighborhood in Mississippi where nobody knew who he really was or what he had allegedly done. This is not a movie plot. This is real life. And it happened just weeks ago. Acting DHS Assistant Secretary Lauren Biss responded to the arrest by saying that one of Canada's most wanted criminals is now behind bars and will finally face justice for his crimes. Homeland Security. And while that is welcome news, the real question Canadians should be asking is this: how many more are out there? Canada's most wanted list has 25 names on it. Criminal networks and violent offenders who use illegal immigration as an escape hatch are not a theoretical concern. They are a documented reality, and the Walker arrest is one data point in a much larger picture. Tom Wong. Let's talk about how this actually works, because a lot of people do not realize how relatively easy it can be for someone to cross a border and disappear when they are determined to do so. Canada shares the longest undefended border in the world with the United States. Thousands of kilometers of forests, rivers, and open fields separate the two countries. Official border crossings are staffed and monitored, but the space between those crossings is a different story entirely. When someone in Canada is subject to an enforceable removal order or a Canada-wide arrest warrant, the Canada Border Services Agency is legally obligated to act as quickly as possible. But if an individual fails to appear for a removal interview or a scheduled removal date, the CBSA can issue a Canada-wide warrant for their arrest. Canada Border Services Agency. The key word there is Canada-wide. Once someone crosses that border illegally, the warrant stays active. But actually finding that person becomes an international challenge involving multiple agencies across two countries. And that process takes time. Sometimes it takes a very long time. The Canada Border Services Agency's Criminal Investigations Section investigates and pursues the prosecution of persons who willfully violate Canada's border-related legislation. Individuals who violate Canada's immigration laws are subject to serious consequences, including criminal charges, court fines, probation, imprisonment, and a criminal record. Canada.ca. But enforcing those consequences against someone who has already fled the country requires cross-border cooperation, intelligence sharing, and the right tip at the right time. In Walker's case, U.S. Marshals Service and its Gulf Coast Regional Fugitive Task Force, Homeland Security Investigations, and the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives all worked together after learning Walker was using an alias and hiding in Tupelo, Mississippi. WLBT. It took a multi-agency international effort spanning nearly 2 years to track this man down, and even then, they found him armed. Now let's connect this to something bigger, because the Walker case is part of a pattern that Canadian and American authorities are increasingly concerned about. The idea that international borders can serve as an escape route for violent criminals is not new, but it is becoming more visible in 2026 as law enforcement on both sides ramp up cooperation. Joint Task Force Alpha, a partnership between the U.S. Department of Homeland Security and the Department of Justice, has to date resulted in more than 380 domestic and international arrests of leaders, organizers, and significant facilitators of criminal activity along the northern border. U.S. Department of Justice. That is not a small number, and it reflects how seriously both governments are now taking the issue of dangerous individuals using border crossings, both legal and illegal, to evade accountability. But here is something people often do not think about. This is not just about fugitives running away from Canada into the United States. The problem flows in both directions. Under Canada's Immigration and Refugee Protection Act, even minor criminal offenses can result in someone being considered criminally inadmissible when attempting to cross the Canadian border. Dogan Law. That means if you have a criminal record anywhere in the world and you try to enter Canada, even at a regular checkpoint, you could be turned away, detained, or deported. Canada's entry requirements are extremely strict when it comes to foreign nationals with a criminal history, and even a single misdemeanor in the United States is likely to make you criminally inadmissible to Canada, because most are equivalent to hybrid offenses in Canadian law. Dogan Law. The system is designed to keep dangerous people out. But what happens when someone already inside the country commits a crime and then runs? That is the gap that cases like Walker's expose. And for the family of Trevor Dalton John, the man who lost his life that night in May 2024 in Toronto, that gap meant nearly 2 years of waiting. 2 years of wondering if the person allegedly responsible for taking their loved one away would ever be brought to justice. 2 years of carrying a grief that never had the closure it deserved. Walker will be transported to Toronto, where he will be charged with first-degree murder and attempted murder in connection with the fatal shooting on May 7, 2024. CP24 justice may be slow, but in this case, it appears to be coming. Now here is what you need to take away from all of this. If you see something suspicious in your community, you report it. If you know something about a wanted person, you report it. The CBSA operates a border watch line at 1-888-502-9060 specifically for this reason. Anonymous tips lead to real arrests. The Walker case proves that. Someone knew something, someone saw something, And that information, combined with the work of dedicated law enforcement officers across two countries, brought a dangerous alleged murderer out of hiding and into custody. Canada is not a place where violent criminals can hide forever. And 2026 is proving to be a year where the cooperation between Canadian and American authorities is stronger than it has ever been. This story is a reminder that the justice system, even when it is slow, even when it feels broken, can still reach across borders to find the people who think they have escaped it. Trevor John's family deserved that. And every Canadian deserves to live in a country where people like Adrian Walker cannot simply disappear. If this story opened your eyes to something you did not know before, please give this video a thumbs up. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. And subscribe to this channel because we bring you the real stories, the important updates, and the information that actually matters to Canadians right now. And drop a comment below. What do you think needs to change to make sure dangerous fugitives cannot escape across our borders so easily? Let's talk about it.